This sequence, in so many ways, looks like it could have been part of a modern day grappling or MMA fight. You have someone who looks like they just sprawled to defend a takedown, and then they do a little backspin to get their hooks in back control. And right about now in a modern fight, the guy would be working for a rear naked choke. But um, just to suspend disbelief for a moment, let's say that it isn't legal here, although you do see some chokeholds in some of these old professional wrestling matches. But um, here, instead of rear naked choke, the top man goes for a pretty vicious neck crank. And for those of you who've done jiu-jitsu or MMA and only ever really played with getting chokes once you get back control because that's the lowest hanging fruit, let me assure you that the neck cranks from back control are just as much of a problem. It's not as universally trained because of the safety issue when you do cervical cranks, but I mean, if you can do bad things to someone while you're choking them from behind, let me assure you, you can also do bad things when you're threatening to break their entire spine with a neck crank. So I've trained at gyms where neck cranks were legal. Weirdly enough, including when I was an early teenager, like one of the first jiu-jitsu gyms that I was a part of, they didn't ban neck cranks, or at least they never told me not to do them. And I was like sitting there doing them as a little teenager. They work. They're brutal. And if you can end a fight by choking someone unconscious, I'm pretty sure you can end a fight by breaking their neck too. And the bottom man is just as vulnerable in both of these situations, right? So neck cranks can end a fight in a very brutal way. And I'll also say, like, from a competition standpoint, they're not even universally illegal. Like, you can go to plenty of tournament competition formats where neck cranks are legal. Um, you know, and the funniest thing about that is like a crossface as a takedown counter or as a positional manipulation is basically a neck crank, right? It's just not done with the same intent or the same control. It's meant to encourage the guy to move voluntarily, much like most of these old punishment holds were. But for all intents and purposes, a crossface is basically like just one grip shy of a neck crank. It's encouraging someone to move because they're undergoing cervical pressure, and the general rule is you have to go where your spine takes you, or you have to go where you are being taken by way of your spine, right? So neck cranks, just because people don't train them as often, don't make the mistake of thinking that they're not just as juicy an option. It's kind of a blind spot in my opinion for most people because they don't train them. And if you can go to like expert grappling divisions in certain promotions, I think Naga neck cranks are legal last time I looked. Um, Plenty of other promotions like that too. And face cranks and neck cranks are legal in a lot of catch wrestling rules to this day, to my knowledge. So people just don't train them as often. And you could argue that a choke is lower hanging fruit and there's less chance of permanent injury. But I wouldn't even make that argument. I would say that most people repeat that argument only because they are not aware with just how widespread the problem of chokes causing strokes in jiu-jitsu gyms are. That's a whole different topic, maybe even a different video topic for a different day. But you can cause permanent injury and death with rear naked chokes. This should be common sense to most people, but it's not. If a choke is held for too long, you can induce a stroke in someone, and that the data is not out there in terms of how much this happens in jiu-jitsu gyms. But I assure you, it's more than people think. So neck cranks are dangerous, chokes are dangerous. They both have a very unique danger signature, and people would be foolish to think that either does not. And they are both very effective from back control.